Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and today I'm here again with the past 24 hours of news for day 57. I'm sure a lot of y'all have a whole bunch of questions about what that title means. It's a little bit cryptic, it just says Ukraine wins a battle, but which battle? And also in the thumbnail says Russia gives up. But what are these two things talking about? Well, I've got great news today about Mariupol. It appears that the Russians have largely given up on attacking the Azovstal and trying to wipe out the remaining defenders inside of that metallurgical plant. So that, to answer the question, is what the Ukrainians have won today. That is a huge victory for them, but we're going to go over the exact details of that much later on in the stream when we actually get to the Mariupol part of the news. So stick around, and I'll go into a huge level of detail about the videos we've gotten, the news we've seen, and everything else that's pertaining to Mariupol today. Now, beyond that, we're going to get to the schedule for tonight's news. There has been absolutely nothing in the Kyiv/Chernihiv area. We call that the Northern Front here on the channel, so unfortunately this will not be in today's schedule. Neither will the Sumy area or anywhere around there. This entire area has been largely quiet today, or at least largely quiet in terms of incredibly relevant news. We have more news tonight than we've had in a very long time. We have 41 individual pieces of news. And I hate to say this because this is something I really pride myself on this stream, is that this map is custom made by me every single day, and I go through the effort of finding all of these bits of news and putting them on myself. And sadly today, the map is once again having technical issues. You can see here that it's in a continuous loop of saving itself, so for some reason it's not able to upload itself and be shared like it normally would be, so I'm going to have to refresh this map, and sadly this means that all the news from today will be lost, and the only way to see it will be on the stream. So I hate to say that, but that's currently what it is. I hope y'all understand. I'm sorry about the trouble here, but nonetheless, it kind of is what it is. So with that, we're now going to go over today's schedule. We're actually going to start off today with the location unknowns first. Then once we get done covering all the location unknowns, we're going to pause for 3 to 5 questions before we move on to the Harkev and Donbass area. We're going to cover the Harkev and Donbass area, which is laden with the news today. We're then going to stop on our way to Mariupol to answer another 3 to 5 questions from the chat. And then we're going to move on to the Mariupol news, cover what's been happening inside of that city today. And I'm so glad to hear the news that's occurred today, because it was actually the fear and the concern of a lot of us here on the channel, in the server, and so on, that Mariupol was about to be quashed. But it looks like their defense has been so dogged that even the Russians have decided to give up on completing their pretty much siege of the city. So finally, after we cover the Mariupol news, we're then going to move on to cover everything that occurred in Zaporizhzhia, Kryvyi Rih, Melitopol, and right outside of Mariupol. And then that will actually conclude all of the news today, except for this bit of international news right up here. So that'll actually be included along with the Southern Front and Mariupol news. And so, without further ado, without holding this thing up way too long, we're now going to get right into the news. Today we've seen a whole bunch of interesting stuff, but to start off with something very odd and interesting to me, we can actually see a Ukrainian anti-aircraft gun being used here in this video. We haven't seen an actual anti-aircraft gun. This looks like some kind of ZSU sort of gun. Of course, I'm not an expert on this kind of on the actual equipment of everything that they use, so I'm just going to preface that with that, because a lot of people come in here and they're kind of like the rivet counters. You know, that's what like, you know, like the super experts of like the niche things are called in the train world, and also I guess you could call them that in the military world as well, where they know the exact specification, variant, and such things of weapons. I'm just going to say I don't know all of them. I know a decent amount, but I don't know everything, so I've got to tell you all that. But with that, here's the video of this being used.
Еще правее. Правее. Все, огонь.
So we can see, not using it. There is a bit of an audio delay, sadly. But nonetheless, they are ripping with this thing right now. Goodness.
Блядь, не пустой нихуя. Ну не пустой. Что делать? Садись, блядь. Так что делать тут? Садись. Давай.
So they they just did a little shoot and scoot there with the ZSU gun. I believe that's probably a 37mm gun that's mounted to the back of a truck. I'm not sure what kind, of course, but we did see it was in a truck bed. They fired it out towards the distance at an unknown target, and then they scooted. So that was an incredibly interesting video. But without further ado, we're now going to move on to the next one, where we can see today that an MLRS from the Russian side was hitting Ukrainian positions. So I'm not going to explain too much. It's a self-explanatory video, but here it is. We're going to show it real quick. So as you can see, the rockets are now landing around the small village, and most likely on Ukrainian positions, although I can't really see them from here. I can't really see any Ukrainian forces, but nonetheless, the rockets are falling. I'm not really sure if these are thermal barracks. The explosions do look a little bit different than the normal kind of rocket barrage, because we've seen loads of them here on this channel, and usually the explosions are much smaller, even from the larger caliber rockets. So I'm not really sure if these are thermal barracks from a toss, but the description on this video said that they could most likely be some kind of toss missile. Well, not really toss missile, toss rocket. So with that, that's the end of the video. Not really much to describe. We actually didn't see any damage being caused to Ukrainian forces, so I can't really comment on how much damage was caused, or even if there was any damage, because we couldn't see them in the video. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Russians destroy a Ukrainian tank at a crossroads. This is, of course, one of those unfortunate videos where we see a Ukrainian tank being destroyed by the Russians, but I do have to note that the Russians try and upload as much as possible to show that they are winning as often as possible, and we see these videos very rarely, so that's telling us that they're not really destroying a lot of vehicles when you compare that to the amount of Ukrainian footage that is coming out of them destroying Russian vehicles, which is on a much larger scale and much more often. So without further ado, I'm just going to show you all the video. It is in a infrared footage. So we can see here, the crosshairs is right on the tank at the crossroad. We can actually see the ATGM fly in from off screen over here on the right side. You can see it right there. And it hits the tank dead on, and it looks like it caused an ammunition detonation, which has completely destroyed the tank. Very unfortunate, of course. But nonetheless, this is a very rare occurrence. And so while it does appear to be bad news for the Ukrainians, it doesn't seem to be bad news overall for the entire situation on the front lines. But once again, it's unfortunate to see that a Ukrainian tank crew has been killed, sadly, by a Russian attack. But with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, where we can see a Stugna long shot. According to the description on this post, this Stugna was fired from a distance of 4.5 kilometers. And just to give you all a perspective of how far that is for American viewers, that's about a distance of around 3 miles. So just imagine that you're on... Golly, yeah, that's really long. I don't know how to equate that in kind of like a common sense way. But if y'all have ever taken a trip to Washington, D.C., the length of the National Mall is about a mile from the Lincoln Memorial to the Capitol building. And so imagine this Stugna being fired down that length, the length of the National Mall, 3 times over, and then hitting a tank dead on and destroying it. So I'm going to let y'all see the video. Something wild here. You can see the T-72 backing out of what appears to be a tree line right here. And so we are waiting. Unfortunately, I cannot really see where the Stugna is, if they've even fired it yet. I don't believe they have. I believe they're just watching the tank. The tank is now going forward again. It looks like it's moving down along the tree line, trying to get to another position. And now we can tell that the Stugna has been fired and is on the way towards the tank. The craziest thing about this is that the Russians have actually put their tank in the worst position possible, because now the rear part of the tank, the weakest part of any tank, is now facing directly towards the Stugna. So we know that this will definitely be some kind of critical damage to the vehicle or a complete destruction of it. We can now see that the Stugna hits what looks to be... Let me make sure. It looks like it actually was about to hit the turret, but then they aimed it down a little bit lower to go into the engine bay. But nonetheless, you can already see that smoke right at the end of the video was already coming out of the turret hatch, which means that the Stugna blew through the engine block and then through the metal compartment that divides the engine bay from the crew compartment and then into the crew compartment. Otherwise, the smoke wouldn't be venting out of the turret itself. So we know that that tank was completely destroyed, and the crew may have been killed with it as well. Of course, it is a good thing to see that the Ukrainians are constantly being able to show large amounts of Russian losses on film. Everything on this channel revolves around some kind of video evidence, and so seeing this does confirm for us that the Russians are in fact still taking heavy losses and the Ukrainians are inflicting them daily on the Russian forces. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next location unknown news, where we can see that the Ukrainians are still using small drones to drop bomblets. It's an incredibly interesting video, but here it is nonetheless. I'm just going to let y'all see it and not really provide a lot of commentary because it's pretty self-explanatory. We've seen this a million times. Not sure if it has copyrighted music all the way through. It does. So I'm going to have to turn that off and just let y'all see the video. We now see that they changed perspective and they're looking at another Russian unit amongst a tree line. Now they're dropping the bomblets on these tanks. And that looks like a dead-on hit to the rear part of the vehicle. I mean, you see that they keep on dropping bomblets specifically on this tank over and over. Looks like they hit the rearward side of it, the center, probably directly on the turret, and then they hit the front. I don't know if that was a BMP. It kind of did look like one. So they hit the infantry compartment, the turret, and then the front engine bay, all in that order. So with that, that's the end of that video. Once again, it's incredibly interesting to see the Ukrainians using drones to a huge extent and effectively. But without further ado, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Russian Smerch unit in action all the way from being reloaded to actually being used. So I'm going to let y'all see this video. It is once again a rare look into how a Smerch artillery unit operates. But anyways, here's the video. Here we can see the reloading process for a Smerch being conducted. It appears that there is a decent amount of vehicles actually involved in this process, unlike Tochka loading, which is very interesting because it actually only requires 2 vehicles, the launch vehicle and the resupply vehicle. In this video, we can actually see that the Smerch requires a vehicle to carry the rockets, then a separate truck to crane over those rockets onto its flatbed, and then apparently the loading is done from there into the Smerch itself. So it's actually a reloading process that requires 3 vehicles total for each Smerch, which is something very interesting. We can now see what appears to be Russians getting some kind of artillery coordinates, perhaps inside of the Smerch itself. We can now see the Smerch moving through the field and preparing to fire. We now see them climbing up onto the launcher. We now hear an interview being given.
Машина все считает, самое главное не ошибиться, все правильно положить. Задачи разные бывают, ночью, днем, в любое время суток надо быстро все это сделать. Чем быстрее мы сделаем, тем быстрее нанесем удар, соответственно.
Now we can see the Smerch firing. Smerches are one of the largest caliber MLRSs that the Russians and Ukrainians field at the moment. I believe that the caliber of the rockets is somewhere around 210 millimeters. So now we can see them firing the Smerch again from another angle, this time from a drone. And of course, this is probably being aimed at a city like Harkev, where they're just firing the Smerch into a residential area, most likely, praying that it hits something that is a military target. So, once again, another interesting video showing how the Russian artillery units are operating, like the Tochka battery, and now we can see how a Smerch battery operates. And honestly, it looks incredibly complicated, if not overcomplicated. The fact that you have to have 2 vehicles to reload a Smerch is just obscene. And on top of that, they don't look like small vehicles or cheap vehicles to produce. They in fact look like the same kind. Well, yeah, it looks like the same truck bed for this vehicle. I'm not sure about this one. This actually looks like some kind of Kamaz that is hooked up to a trailer, but nonetheless, this is literally the exact same kind of chassis that the Smerch is using. I don't know how much it costs to produce these vehicles, but considering that they have a driver's cab and then some kind of secondary command cab or communications cab, I'm assuming. I don't know what exactly it's used for. It does look like a very, very large chassis to produce, and so I'm assuming that is much more expensive than the Ural 4320 just due to the amount of materials it requires to be built. So it looks like, really, I don't know how quickly these Smerches can be reloaded or how much logistical effort is going into actually supplying them. But the actual fact that they're having to use this many vehicles to reload one Smerch, and this probably actually takes a decent amount of time, makes it seem to me that it's a bit of an unreasonable and uneconomical use of equipment and supplies, and I believe that it would have been better, honestly, if they just continued to use grads. But then again, this is just coming from my input, looking at it from a logistical and cost standpoint. But with that, we're not going to talk about it too much. We've seen the video, and that pretty much explains itself. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, where we see the Ukrainian Special Forces blowing up a bridge in an unknown location. This was today, but we don't know exactly where this was. This may be suggesting that Russian forces are making a reasonable amount of an advance or are posing enough of a threat that Ukrainian special forces are now trying to blow up a bridge to either slow their advance or destroy their logistical units, their logistical abilities behind their own lines. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see fighting on the front lines from the Ukrainian perspective. So without further ado, I'm just going to show you the video real quick. You can hear some gunfire in the distance, and that always lets me know that these videos are confirmed to be real, and they're actually showing what's going on. Because whenever we watch Russian footage, at least until recently when we saw all the Chechens getting shot, we never heard firefights in their videos. It was always quiet, and it made it look very propaganda-like and very staged, which it probably was. But in Ukrainian videos, you can tell that it's legitimate, but you can actually hear firefighting going on in the distance, unlike what you would never hear in a Russian video. So with that, we're now going to let the video continue.
Давай, отходи.
Also, it's very interesting that he actually has a silencer slash suppressor on the gun.
На, сука, блядь.
But he doesn't have optics. You know, it's kind of weird to see how equipment is provided to the Ukrainian forces in a way, because sometimes you see them with optics and without a silencer. Sometimes you see them with a whole 9 yards, silencer, optics, even a vertical foregrip. But this guy just has the silencer. But still, it's better than nothing. We can now see his friend is taking some shots. And I'd also like to note, you can clearly tell, unlike his Chechen friends, that this man actually knows how to fire a rifle because he's planning it very well and good on his shoulder, which lets us know that this man actually has some experience shooting guns, or someone actually told him how to do it, and he's not just doing it for the vine, you know, as some people would say. So we're going to let the video continue. We can also see something else is in. Wait a minute. Yeah, that's still braced on the shoulder, although hardly. It's kind of on there, but then again, I sometimes hold rifles like that because I'm a pretty tall guy, and so And also I have pretty long arms, so for some reason a lot of rifles don't really fit me well, and so I have to hardly put the stock on my shoulder to shoot them. But still, we can see that this guy isn't just pushing down on the trigger and letting the entire magazine let fly in one shot. He's actually doing some very controlled bursts, which tells me that this guy in the video is much more competent looking than his Chechen counterparts that have been fighting in Mariupol for the past few weeks. So I've got to say, in this one video alone, not trying to be biased or anything, but we can see that this one Ukrainian soldier looks much more experienced in firefighting than any of the Russians we've seen on video. Also here again, we can see that they're bracing the rifles well on their shoulder, and they're also firing in small, controlled bursts or in semi-automatic, which is the normal way that people shoot guns to get the most accuracy out of them. Man, these guys, when you watch a video of these guys right here, they're exuding that level of training and confidence that lets you know these guys actually know what they're doing, unlike others. Also, I'm going to upvote this one because this is a pretty good video. I think people should see this one a little bit more. But still, it's showing a level of confidence that we've never seen in the Chechens. The Chechens just look good on film, but when you actually break down what they're doing, everything they do is just poorly planned. They have very little training, and it doesn't look like they have any kind of experience. So it's good to see that the Ukrainians are being held in a higher standard and that they are living up to it. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see that a turret of a Russian tank actually lifted off of the tank, probably in an ammo detonation. Well, obviously in an ammo detonation, that's really the only way you could get enough force to do this, and it flew sideways into an apartment building. Now, this is something bizarre, but you can see the turret right here, and it's lodged sideways in this apartment building. Now, that's weird. I haven't seen that before. So with that, that's the end of that video. So it's a very interesting, odd thing to see. It's kind of like those pictures from World War II, or any war for that matter, where something really odd happens. And so I hope that does go down in the books somewhere, and people talk about in the future how a Russian tank's turret, a T-72B3's turret, got lifted off in an ammo detonation and then flew into an apartment building. Hopefully no one was injured or killed in that incident, but nonetheless, very interesting and something for the books. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a sneak peek. The Russians are actually doing something a little bit new and unprecedented this year, and they're showing us a little sneak peek of their military parade that will be coming up on May 9th, which celebrates the victory in World War II, which occurred technically on May 8th, but then they pretty much declared that it was May 9th was the victory day in Russia. But here in America, it's actually May 8th, because that's when we actually signed the Articles of Surrender with Germany. Well, Germany signed the Articles of Surrender with the United States. That's a better way of saying it. But anyways, let's take a look at what we can expect. By the way, this is a joke, of course. So don't take this seriously. But you can see they got some TVs, rugs, flower pots, a lot of loot. See Lukashenko sitting there. Also, I don't know when. I've watched all the military parades. I've never seen this footage before of Putin looking like that at a military parade. That's not the way to look when you're celebrating your country's victory in a war. But anyways, we see some air conditioning units. Pretty funny stuff. But I'm going to cut it off there because, you know, we're still in the middle of the news. It was a funny little joke. So I was just wanting to leave it at that. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, where we can see the Ukrainians are apparently stealing drones as well, as an Orlan appears to have parachuted down on some power lines, and the Ukrainians grab this thing up like it's a tank that's been left by the Russians, and the tanks are in season. So I'm going to let y'all see that real quick. It's something kind of funny in a way how the guy just grabs it. So you can see him run out there. It's stuck to the power lines. He cuts the line with a knife, and he just picks up the drone, and he runs off with it. So they've once again gotten another Orlan 10 drone. Incredibly good to know, but we do know from the last video we saw of an Orlan 10 being captured that they appear to be made incredibly poorly. They actually use a lot of civilian parts and a lot of cheap made items that are found easily in the civilian market. So it doesn't look like it has any kind of specialized technology on it, and it's really just a glorified, I guess you could call it recreational drone. So with that, we're going to move on from this video to the next one, which we only have about 3 bits of location unknown news left, where we can see that the Ukrainians have once again managed to capture some Hurricanes. Hurricanes are upgraded BMD-21 Grads, and here we can see that the Ukrainians managed to appear, managed to capture about 2 of them, as we can see in the video. So here's the first one.
Ураган, похоже, да? ЗСО ураган. Кабіна знищена, техніка знищена повністю. І воно інше стоїть.
So we can see the other one there in the distance.
Ще одна стоїть. Тут їх багато було. Повтікали інші, бо капонірів багато. Ця стоїть без коліс. А ця ціла ще. Сама установка ціла. Правда, влучання було ракети. Влучання було. Колеса познімали. Колеса познімали. Ну, стволи цілі. Стволи цілі. Я думаю, що відновлять. Вона ушкоджена, вдарена. От. Але я думаю, що відновлять наші майстри на ремонтних заводах. Так, є. Вони розбирали, мабуть, запчастини, що могли, знімали. Угу.
So with that, that's the end of that video. But you can see there that they did manage to, I guess you could call capture 2 Hurricanes. It looks like reasonably intact, although this one has suffered a large amount of damage to the cab. But nonetheless, the actual rocket launching systems appear to be largely intact. So I'm not sure if they'll be able to find a use for these, but nonetheless, they were abandoned by Russian troops. Largely in intact condition, not as destroyed as other vehicles we've seen. And we have seen Ukrainians running vehicles and intending to use them even with much more damage than what we've seen in this video. So hopefully they can repurpose these vehicles, and now it's time to go to spreadsheets, because I have 2 of them here and they actually show some very interesting information. First off, we can see a kind of a chart showing worldwide support for Ukraine by country. This is in terms of monetary aid, which is an incredibly interesting graph to see because we've never seen anything like this before. First off, this is not up to date. This was taken from February 24th to March 27th. So you do have to remember that these figures may be very much different at this point. We know that the United States has still provided multiple several hundred million, if not billion-dollar aid packages to Ukraine since the time of the spreadsheet. But this is the first time I've seen any information compiled about international aid to Ukraine in a graph. And so let's take a look at this. We can see, of course, that this graph is in euros, so keep that in mind, everyone. But we can see that the United States provided around correction, it looks like around $5 billion as of March 27th in military aid and around another $3.5 billion in humanitarian aid, beating out every single other country in this list. We're then going to cover the United Kingdom and Poland and skip everyone else because we're not going to go over everyone. That's hair splitting and would take way too long. But we can see that Poland didn't really provide a lot of military aid up to March 27th. It was mostly financial aid. And then the United Kingdom appeared to have given mostly humanitarian aid with a small amount of financial and then some military aid mixed in there as well. But once again, a very small amount, and it pales in comparison to what the United States has been doing and providing to Ukraine. And I do have to say that the United States at the moment has been stepping up to the plate and providing a large deal of aid as far as we know. Hopefully we can get an infographic that is up to date and does show this information as of April 21st or the end of April. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the casualty reports for today, which I know everyone is dying to get a hold of because they are something good to know, and we haven't had one on this channel for quite some time. This is the official statement from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense today as to the losses of the Russians. We're going to break these down bit by bit. First off, we've seen that they've pretty much killed 21,000 troops. That is an incredibly high number, and if we break that down by day, we know that we're on day 57. So let me get out a calculator real quick and do that. We're on day 57. So they've lost 21,000 troops over 57 days. That means that they're losing on average around 368 soldiers per day as this war goes on. That is massive. If we let's pull this up. Let's look into this question a little bit further. How many soldiers did I spelled soldiers terribly. Soldiers did the USSR lose per day in World War II? Let's get a comparison of that to see if it's comparable to Soviet losses then. How many soldiers were killed per day? Let's see. For the 1,364 days that America fought in World War II, and you got to remember that we were fighting in the Pacific Front and in the European theater, and overall, over all of that, for the course of 1,364 days, we lost 220 servicemen per day. That's compared to 368 by the Russians, which is about 1.5 times, if not 1.75 times more troops per day than the United States was losing over the course of World War II. Now, the Soviet Union, I think the numbers were actually far off with them. I think they were losing much more than that per day. Unfortunately, we can't get a figure on that incredibly quickly, and I don't want to tie everyone up trying to look for that. But you can get the idea that World War II was the largest war that has ever occurred in world history. The most destructive one as well. And the Americans didn't manage to lose that many soldiers in a single day on average over the course of that entire war, which tells you a lot about how bad the Russians are doing right now. We can also see that they've downed some 172 planes. They're getting close to shooting down their 200th plane, and I'm not sure how many actual aircraft the Russians have in the Russian Air Force. So let's pull that up. And we're not going to hair split about transport aircraft, fighter jets, because we know they've lost pretty much the gamut on all of them. How many aircraft does the Russian Air Force have? And when I say 3,863 military aircraft. So that is, I believe, around, let me think. Let me just do the math there real quick. So 176. Let me make sure that number is correct. 172. 172 divided by 3,863 aircraft. They have lost 4.5% of their Air Force's power over the past 60 days. That gives you a perspective of how bad things are going for them, considering that they've lost 4.5% of their Air Force, and aircraft are a very hard thing to replace, especially in the modern world. Moving on from that, we've seen that they've lost 151 helicopters, 829 tanks, 393 artillery pieces, 2,118 armored personnel carriers. That's a huge number. Let's pull up how many APCs they have. How many APCs does Russia have? Hopefully, they're not hair splitting here in the Wikipedia post. Let's go down here and see if we can get a number. Man, they're dividing it up by a vehicle. That's kind of hair splitting for me. How many armored fighting vehicles? 12,420 tanks, and 36,000 other armored vehicles. But I'm not sure if that's including armored cars and such, so unfortunately we're not going to be able to get a percentage on how many vehicles that is for the Russians in total. But then we've seen that they've lost 4 mobile short-range ballistic missile systems. These would be very similar to Tochka and Iskander missile launchers. We've seen that they've lost 136 MLRSs. Those would be the Grads, Hurricanes, and Smerches. They've lost 8 boats. We know that that now includes the Moskva as one of them, a $750 million ship with a crew of 550 to around 600 men. We've seen that they've also lost 1,508 vehicles. Most of those are armored cars, 76 fuel trucks. Wait a minute, I think that number is actually meshed together with the supply vehicles because we don't actually see an independent number for that on this one. We can see that they've lost 76 fuel trucks, 166 drones. We're actually seeing the number of drones they're losing go up incredibly drastically, I guess you could say, over the past few weeks, because it does appear that the Russians are trying to weigh in more and more on their drone systems, because now they're seeing how effective they are when used by the Ukrainians. And when I say that, I don't mean that the Russians are, looking at the Ukrainians and trying to emulate their success. You have to think historically about this kind of stuff. Drone warfare is brand new, really, in terms of warfare, especially in a large war like this one, where it's fought in between two countries that are kind of actually giving each other a run for their money in a way. And we can see that in World War I, for example, when aircraft started to get armed by one side with machine guns, the other side was like, wow, that's really effective. We need to start equipping our own aircraft with machine guns and start fighting the other aircraft. That's kind of what's happening now. And that's really simplified as far as how World War I went, but that's what we're seeing now. The Ukrainians were using drones en masse from the start of the war, and the Russians said, wow, that's really working incredibly well. We need to emulate what the Ukrainians are doing. And so now they started to use drones in the previous weeks, and now they're getting shot down in an unprecedented number. We can also see that the Russians have lost 67 anti-aircraft warfare systems. That number has gone up. I'm not really sure how much, though, but I do remember that it was around the high 50s last time we saw, and we've seen that they've lost 27 special equipment vehicles, and I do not think that that number has gone up recently. So with that, that is the end of the loss breakdown. We can see that the Russians are losing a huge amount of supplies for the amount of gain they're getting. And we've got to remember that half of this was probably lost up in the northern front, where no activity is going on to this day anymore because they withdrew all of their forces from the northern front and half of the eastern front as well. And so with that, we've actually reached the end of our first segment of news with the location unknowns. And while we move on to the Harkev and Donbass news, we're going to answer 3 to 5 questions from the chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
So good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt once again. And our first question of the night is from longtime channel supporter Will Riley, who puts in a $20 donation and says, Putin is actually planning a May 9th parade in Mariupol. Mr. Cheney believes him to be slightly delusional. He also tasks you to find out the capabilities of the Phoenix Ghost UAV. Do not disappoint Mr. Cheney.
I will not try to disappoint Mr. Cheney, so let's get an answer. Phoenix Ghost drone. I have not heard of this drone myself until now, so let's see if we can find some kind of information. Meet Phoenix Ghost. This was published by Breaking Defense. I'm not sure how trusty of a source they are, but this was posted on the 21st of April. And one thing that's popping out to me immediately is that there's no pictures of this drone. So let's go up to the top and read for a second. Lace 800, the Phoenix Ghost Tactical Drone. A never before revealed system designed by the Air Force that will now prove its mettle. Okay, that's something that I don't really like that, number one, because how in the world do we know it's real? You know? That's something that's always up in the air for me. If we can't see it, how do we know it's real? Because if there's no pictures of this and there's no proving of its design or its capabilities, I'm very skeptical that that would be sent over. Because first off, we haven't even removed the kinks from its systems, most likely, if it's that early on in its development and it's never before been revealed. I don't know. I just have a lot of questions about that, and that always throws in a question of legitimacy when it can never be proven that this thing actually even exists, because it's been never before revealed, which says that no one even knows about it. So unfortunately, we can't get any pictures on it to show what it looks like. We'll pull this up here. That looks like a picture of it. But then again, it's never before seen. And then these are being called ghost drones as well. And then here, this looks like maybe the Phoenix Ghost. Maybe that's some kind of concept image of it. But nonetheless, I would like to talk more about it, but this is news to me, and it looks like it's news to everyone else, because it looks like most of the news articles that have come out about it, like the one we just read, came out today. So we'll try and get some more information about that as time goes on, try and get a better answer as to what the Phoenix Ghost is. We will not leave Dick Cheney disappointed in any way, and I do thank you so much for the support. It does help us to continue to run this channel and keep us doing what we're doing. So I thank you very much once again for the support. I hope that answered the question in a way, and with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Adrian Carter, who says, Azov Battalion is closed in Mariupol underground with exits blocked off. So in order for Russian generals and high ranks not to be lost, outnumbered nearly 10 to 1, so no need to go in. Starving them will do the job, and mission done.
I can't agree, but the thing is that if the Russians were as competent as they are trying to paint themselves to be, then why wouldn't they be able to wipe out the Azovstal as easily and effectively as it's claimed? If they outnumber them 10 to 1, usually in some kind of offensive action, you just need to outnumber the enemy 3 to 1. So why not just push in? Obviously, if the Russians are a capable fighting force, they would be able to wipe out these remaining defenders. And if they outnumber them 10 to 1, that means that they have 20,000 soldiers encircling this pocket that is incredibly small at this point. I believe it's only a square mile in size now, and you have 20,000 troops around a square mile perimeter. I mean, like, gosh, like, imagine that. That would be like having 20,000 people surrounding the Pentagon. And you can get the idea of how crowded that would look. So I'm not really sure if they outnumber them that much. That may be some kind of propaganda figure. But at the same time, that may be the case. But to answer that question the best I can, well, really the comment the best I can, I think, and this is the honest truth, is that they've decided that pushing into the Azovstal would be a serious loss for them. They would lose a lot of personnel and equipment. And so the truth is that they have assessed the situation and have decided that the battle itself, if they were to try and wage it inside the Azovstal, would be so costly that the gain they would get out of it wouldn't mean anything. And so they're just trying to sit there and pretty much hold them inside of the Azovstal and then say they won. But you can't sit there and say, when you're, this would be like in the medieval ages attacking a castle and saying you won because you control everything except for the keep. And the keep is still controlled by the defending forces. That doesn't mean you've won. That means that you're lying and you're just trying to act like you have won, but you actually have not taken the entire city, which means that it's still being contested. So until the Azovstal is wiped out, and until the Russians say, yeah, we have the ability to wipe them out and actually do it, and they've withdrawn at this point, I'm going to say that the Ukrainians have won this battle for now, and we're just going to have to wait and see in the future if the Russians actually are able and competent enough to actually push into the Azovstal and take out the defenders. But for now, the defenders of Mariupol are getting some breathing room. They were given the ultimatum as well. This is something else important to think about. The Russians were so confident in their abilities to wipe out all the defenders of Mariupol that when they were just pushed into the Azovstal, and it was the first few hours of them being confined to that one area, the Russians issued an ultimatum that either they would surrender or they would be killed. And the Ukrainians turned down that offer to surrender. And so that gives you another good idea that the Russians at that time were trying to act like, oh, we could just wipe them out real easy. It's going to be no problem for us because we're just such a good and competent fighting force. And now we can see that they've reversed that, and they're like, although we told them we would kill them all if they didn't surrender, and they didn't, we're actually just going to leave and say we won. That tells you that there's a whole bunch of fake stuff going on there with the Russians. And so, as far as I'm concerned, the Ukrainians have won that battle for now, but if the Russians revisit it, the situation may be different because then again, they are getting no supplies. They are confined to an incredibly small space inside the Azovstal, which isn't really a hospitable place for people, and so we'll just have to wait and see. So with that, I hope I've addressed that comment, and we're going to move on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to move on to the Harkev news and the news from the Donbass in general.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from longtime channel supporter Tito McLovin. He says, the NII-2 building of the Russian Ministry of Defense has been burned down. The Kremlin kept their aerospace lab/nuclear ICBM attack plans there. Can NATO now end this war conventionally and save lives?
Of course, I did hear that news, and I thank you so much for the support. Sadly, I didn't put it down on the map because I saw it way on early today, and I was like, oh my god, wow, that's huge. And so I was wanting to go back and get that news, but when I went back to find it, I couldn't find it. And so I was like, wow. I was like, that really sucks. So I couldn't put it down. So yes, that is true. Pretty much one of the most important places in the Russian strategic command caught on fire and almost burned to the ground today, nearly completely, and with it, a lot of valuable information, documents, and files were lost. However, I don't believe that was the only place where those documents and files were held. There's probably a backup location that has all of that information in it, because that would be weird for the Russians. The Americans have a contingency plan for everything, and that would be weird for the Russians to not have a contingency plan if that location was to be attacked or destroyed in some way, and it's now caught on fire, which didn't really fall under either of those criteria, but it did get destroyed nonetheless. And so I don't think that they've lost all of that information. I still don't think that the U.S. would be able to end the war conventionally, because I'm sure that all of the actual safeguards of people following their orders are still in place, and I don't think that's actually affected the Russian nuclear command under any sense. But I do thank you very much for the question, and I hope that does address it. And so with that, we have reached the end of this question segment. I thank you all so much for your support. The support does help us to continue to run this channel and helps us to continue doing what we do. Before we move on, I'd like to say that if you do enjoy this stream and that you would like it to reach more people, make sure to hit the like button. I say that a good bit, and y'all don't know how much hitting the like button helps out this channel and reaching new people. It helps us out more than anything else. So if you do enjoy it and you want more people to see it and you want more soldiers in the Leaf Spring Army, make sure to hit the like button and spread the word to everyone else to hit the like button as well. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the news in Harkev. We're going to start off as far away as possible, where we've seen that there were MLRSs firing in the direction of Harkev today from some area around the Russian border. So you can see them off in the distance, they're firing. Not really much to explain there. That is the end of that video. We're now going to move on into Harkev itself, where we've actually seen, and it looked like it was actually during the same time of day, that an MLRS strike hit the residential area inside of Harkev right here. So I believe that these videos may be connected in a way, but nonetheless, I'm going to let the video play. You can see that one of the rockets landed right there. This guy turned around. He was lucky. He was lucky to get out there unscathed because he almost ran right into it. You see right here. So he turns around because the explosion occurred right in front of him. We see a dog running another direction. And then an MLRS rocket will hit down here near this curve on the road. And then he goes running into someone's house. And they so graciously help them get in the house. So then they close the door. We can see that someone apparently didn't want to get in the house and they were going to brave their chances elsewhere and kept on running. Hopefully, the best of luck to them. Hopefully, they did stay safe. We see a car trying to hurdle its way through the rocket fire and get through the area. And miraculously, as far as what we can see, it looks like most everyone actually survived the rocket attack, and we don't see any casualties or injuries on camera. So incredibly interesting to see, and it's very, very lucky and fortunate for those involved that they did get out of this rocket attack safely. Well, the Russians continue to attack residential areas over and over and over, and it's something that I've seen for months on end now, and it's very tiresome to see, and I hope that the Russians who are conducting these attacks will be held accountable for their crimes against civilian populations and will be sentenced to a just punishment. So with that, we're now going to move on to the last bit of news in the Harkev area, and then we're going to move into the Donbass in general, where we've actually gotten a large amount of news today indicative of the counterattack that we've known has been going on for some time now. And with that, the last bit of news we've gotten is that the Ukrainians have downed 2 helicopters near Harkev. Initially, it was stated that it was 2 Mi-8s, but as information started to come out more and more, we actually found out that one of them was a Ka-52 and the other was an Mi-8. We saw footage previously of a Ka-52 and an Mi-8 near the same location, and we actually had a caption to that video that it was a medical evac helicopter. I'm not really sure if this was the exact same situation where a Ka-52 was screening for Mi-8s that were picking up wounded soldiers near the front and carrying them back, but nonetheless, both of them were shot down. And we can see in this video the smoke billowing out of one of the wrecks, and we can also see what appears to be the anti-air man pad that did that. So you can see both of them in the distance. Once again, incredibly good to see, and I'm very happy that the Ukrainians are not only destroying the vehicles and troops on the ground, but they are still managing to inflict massive amounts of casualties on the Russian air power, including the helicopters. So, very happy to see that. Very good to know that the Ukrainians are getting the Russians in every single way possible. And so we've got one last bit of film where we can actually see what appears to be drone footage of that specific Mi-8 being hit by the manpad and being shot down. So here's that video. It's a little grainy and hard to see, but the Mi-8's right there. You can see the anti-air missile flying off screen on the right side and hit the helicopter. The helicopter then explodes pretty much. It keels over and rolls into the ground and then explodes. Unfortunately, we cannot see that in the video, but that is the exact same helicopter that we saw in the footage previously. So once again, interesting to see. We've actually seen 2 helicopters get shot down like that now from drone footage. This one and an Mi-35 much earlier on in the war, many weeks ago, maybe even over a month ago. And so with that, we're now going to move on out of the Harkev area. We've gotten some very interesting news out there today. We can still see that the Russians are conducting bombardments on Harkev by MLRS and artillery fire. And now we can see some better news on the outskirts of Harkev where the helicopters were shot down. Once again, very good to see. We're now going to move on down towards the Izium area where we've actually gotten some interesting news. Starting off, we've seen that a Russian plane was shot down near Izium today, as we heard, as there was a report of an explosion and there was two visible parachutes over the city.
Сбили, блядь.
As you can see, he's zooming in on it. You can see the aircraft falling to the ground, and you can see two little white dots, which are the parachutes from the pilots. So I'm assuming that this may have been an Su-34. That is one of the aircraft in the Russian inventory. That is a tandem-seated plane, which means that it has two pilots inside of it. So that means that the Ukrainians may have managed to shoot down one of Russia's smaller-sized tactical bombers. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news that we have from the Izium area today, which is a T-72B being destroyed somewhere on a crossroads near Izium. Here we can see in this video, the T-72B has been completely destroyed and is burning on the spot. Incredibly good to see. We know that the Ukrainians aren't giving an inch of ground to the Russians where they can afford to not do so, and Izium is one of those places. This is also one of the major places where a large thrust was made during the recent offensive that the Russians have launched, with some 22 battalion tactical groups being involved in the push southwards towards Slovyansk. As of now, we know that they have made no meaningful or sizable amount of ground that will require a frontline change on this map, and I hope that does continue to be the case. So with that, our final bit of news from the Izium area is that Ukrainian MLRSs were firing at Russian forces in the direction of Izium. So I'm going to let you all see this video. Once again, it is Ukrainian artillery operating, which is good to see, and it's good to know that the Ukrainian artillery has been winning this war for a large part. So a lot of credit to the artillerists of the Ukrainian army. They are doing the Lord's work these days. But anyways, here's the video. Also very interesting to me is that most of the time when we see MLRSs or any kind of artillery being staged, we'll usually see them being staged in a open field. But this grad here in particular looks like it was being staged in some kind of thicket, which is very interesting to me. We haven't seen that before, so I don't know if that's a change in tactics for their artillery, but we'll have to see in the coming days with the upcoming videos that will most likely come out of Ukrainian artillery if this is now the trend or not. So with that, we're now going to move on from that and the news around Izium in general down towards the rest of the news and the rest of the Donbass. Once again, what's really cool to me tonight is that we've gotten a load of news. We've gotten more news today than we ever could have. And there was so much news that came out today that it was actually really hard to select the news I picked. So I'm actually having to try and get through the news as fast as possible and not really provide a lot of commentary, just so that way we can get to all of it. And then also, get to everything else like questions and such. And so with that, we're now going to move into the Luhansk region of the Donbass, where we've seen today that LPR SPGs were firing at some location further up the lines towards the Ukrainians. So I'm going to show you all this video. Of course, it's pretty standard. We've seen this as usual. I would also like to note, I know this isn't really an observation about the war itself, but I've got to say, this little pasture that they're in is incredibly pretty. The grass is green, it's got rolling hills. This is the kind of stuff I look for in landscape, where I go, wow, that's some very pretty land. And hopefully we can get a little bit of commentary about that in the chat and see what the rest of y'all think about this. Also, notice the lawn chair here. Anyways, I'm going to let the video continue. So we can see that the artillery is now sitting here. Kind of an uneventful video. Usually they're firing in quick succession, but here they fired one round, and the next SPG is just sitting there until now, and it finally fired. Also, we can see another lawn chair. I don't know where the Russians got that. Of course, they probably looted it because it looks like some kind of civilian lawn chair that they're carrying around, or maybe they brought it with them. I'm not entirely sure. But you can also see a large amount of writing on this SPG specifically, so maybe someone can get us a little bit of a translation as to what all of this means. Also, we can see a very weirdly drawn Z here on the back of the turret. Anyways, that's the end of that video. Not really much to explain there. We're now going to move on to the next bit of news that we've located as somewhere in the Luhansk area of Donbass, where we can see a Russian helicopter attack occur somewhere in the area. So I'm going to let you all see this video, and we're going to rewind it to the start.
Вот это я называю войной настоящей. Иншаллах, вертушечка погнала. А ну дай пизды сейчас, да, сейчас она даст пизды. А, она все, она погнала туда наверх, видишь, смотри. Вон, сейчас она туда сейчас. По корректировке.
You can see the helicopter flying out there in the distance.
There.
Well, you now see it doing an atypical upwards rocket launching of its rockets in the pods. I know that wasn't really a depth description of it. You know, I'm not really one for that, but still, it's something that we've seen the Russian helicopters do time and time again, and this is once again to try and protect them as best as possible against ground fire towards the helicopters. This is showing that the Ukrainian air defenses are still incredibly strong because Russian helicopters are not confident enough to get close enough to Ukrainian positions to directly see them and then fire at them. This is an indirect form of fire where they launch the rockets upwards, which increases their range and hopefully allows them to travel for miles and then hit a broad spread of a target. This could be an entire city, an entire field, or somewhere in that nature, but once again, it is highly inaccurate fire, and it most likely is landing towards some town and will be hitting near or directly on civilians and killing them. Once again, kind of evidence of a war crime with the indirect fire here. So with that, we're going to let the video continue.
Класс.
We can now see the helicopter popping flares
Красавчик.
and staying incredibly low to the ground,
Красавчик
practically
вообще.
below the tree line at this point.
Ой, красавчик. Да. Молодец.
We now see it's still continuing on. It's so low to the ground that the chaff and flares don't even really have time to burn out before they hit the ground. That tells you how low that helicopter is. So with that's the end of that video. Kind of a self-explanatory one in a way. And so we're now going to move on down towards the Donetsk area of the Donbass, which we've seen a decent amount of activity in, and it is kind of suggestive that the two major areas of Russian activity inside of the Donbass itself are around Severodonetsk, up here near Rubizhny, and also down here towards Marinka, Pisky, and also Popasna, which is up here in the Luhansk region. That looks like the main prongs of Russian attack. I may mark those up on the next map, but it'll just be deleted tonight, so we're not going to do that now. We'll do that later. But now moving on towards the area around Orlivka, we're going to take a look at the Stugna attack in the Donbass. This is actually a montage of Stugna attacks that have occurred today. 3 of them each. We can see here that there's a Russian armored vehicle, appears to be some kind of BTR-82 or BTR-60 up on a roadway. We can see that the Stugna is aiming at the vehicle, and now the BTR is moving. The Stugna hit it and, of course, destroyed it. So with that, we're moving on to the next bit of footage where we can see that some kind of tank was destroyed. I'm not exactly sure what kind, but then finally, we can see a T-72 here, it seems, being destroyed by another Stugna attack right after it fires as well. So incredibly good to see. We can see that this specific Stugna crew in particular was doing work today and absolutely doing the best they can to try and wipe out the Russian armor. And it looks like they did an incredibly good job at it as well, taking out 3 vehicles in one day. Once again, incredibly good to see, and we know that the Ukrainians aren't giving up an inch without Russian blood being shed for it. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news from around the Donetsk area, and this news appears to have been close to Marinka, and that's why the markers are around here today. Starting off, we can see the Donetsk Republic firing at Ukrainian positions in this video. And with that, that's the end of that video. You can see right there that the Ukrainians, the Ukrainians are getting hammered right there in that one video. by the DPR tank. But nonetheless, we know that this tank is probably within the sights of a Stugna and is probably going to be taken out at least sometime in the future. And so with that, that is the end of that video. Not really much to say there. It's kind of a self-explanatory one. And so we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, where we've seen that a Russian column somewhere in the Donetsk region was attacked today, and it looks like they did suffer a decent amount of equipment loss. So with that, I'm going to let y'all see the video real quick. We can see here that it is, of course, a sizable Russian convoy as usual. It looks like these are mostly main battle tanks, also with an AA vehicle perhaps mixed in with them. We can now see them moving around in this something of what appears to be an opening. We can also see a grouping of tanks down here at the bottom. It looks like 4 vehicles in one group here, and then on the other side of this light brown area, we can see 2 more vehicles in a very close group. We can see that one of the munitions is hit near the vehicles. One of them just hit directly on. We can see shards of metal flying away from the explosion, but we don't know how many vehicles were destroyed in that single explosion. We can now see a vehicle in that video. Well, it appeared to be a T-72B3 cooking off, as we could see little chars of ammunition, I'm assuming, flying out of the tank and towards the ground around it. We can now see that a large amount of munitions are falling on Russian positions, perhaps. That one fell incredibly close. We can see now in this next bit of film that the tanks are still in a group. I'm not really sure if the crews have abandoned them or not, but that did look like a direct hit on another Russian vehicle that is in this large cluster. We can now see a decent amount of Russian vehicles here in this area that we were seeing earlier on in the footage that may be abandoned at this point. I can't really tell for certain right now. We can see here this looks like a BMP-2 perhaps. It looks like the engine is still running on it. This tank has clearly been abandoned. The crew hatches are wide open, and the crew is nowhere to be seen. We can actually see an anti-javelin cage on this tank, which tells us that it was apparently outfitted before the onset of the war, when they thought that these anti-javelin cages would actually do some good against that kind of anti-tank equipment. Also, if you are enjoying the stream at this moment, make sure to hit the like button. It does help us out a lot. But anyways, moving on from that, we can also see down here that a lot of these tanks actually have the anti-javelin cages on top of them, which is telling us that this unit may have survived intact from the start of the war and are still trying to, well, actually were equipped with the anti-javelin cages on top of the turrets, and that the tanks have survived up until this very day where we've now seen them destroyed. We can also see that the crew hatches are open on this tank. I can't tell on this one, and on this one it appears that it has been damaged to an extent. I can't really tell for certain how bad though. And then we can also see that this tank has been abandoned as well. And it looks like a large amount of these tanks actually weren't destroyed, and now we can see Ukrainian forces on the ground inspecting the tanks. So they may have captured a large amount of these vehicles today, right here in this area. We can also see that this T-72 was detracked at some point, probably leading the crew to abandon it and claim that the tank was no longer usable. We can also see ammunition strewn about the top of the tank for the machine gun. And with that, that's the end of the video. It's now looping over again. But you could see there that the Russians took a huge amount of losses in terms of armor, and then the armor they didn't lose, they ended up abandoning and running from. So that's something incredibly interesting to take note of, and I hope that that does remain the case with how Russian columns behave under fire, because if so, the Ukrainians will be able to replenish a large amount of their armor, and are probably recuperating a number that they didn't even have going into the war with in the first place. And so with that, we can also see up here a bat. I'm not really sure what it is, but for some reason it reminded me of the Batman bat flag that we saw a while ago that everyone told me was some kind of intelligence group, GRU, I believe, for the Russians. But nonetheless, we're now going to move on from that to the next bit of news that we've gotten in the Donetsk area. And then once we cover that news, we're going to move on to 3 to 5 more questions from the chat. So stick around. You probably will have your question. Well, actually, if you did put in a super chat, you'll definitely have your question answered. And also to everyone else who's throwing in questions in the chat at Enforcer, we will pick out 3 of them. We pick out 3 every night, and we try and pick out the best ones we can find, and we try to answer them. So if you're throwing in a random question, stick around through the entire stream, and you may be one of the lucky people at the end who gets your question answered. And so with that, we're going to move on to the last news in the Donbass, where we can see a Russian convoy was hit by Ukrainian artillery today. I'm sorry, let me correct this real quick. This was a different compiling of the video at the start, and so for some reason I thought it was different, but actually that is the exact same video we saw of the convoy up here. So I'm not going to drag that out and show that to y'all again. That would be pointless. And so with that, that is the end of the Harkev and Donbass news in general for today. We're now going to move on towards the Mariupol and Southern Front, as well as the news we've gotten from inside of Russia today. But before we do, we're going to answer 3 to 5 more questions from the chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so up next we have a $200 donation from Thomas Condon. Thank you very much, Thomas. That is extremely generous of you. He says, "Thanks, Matt and the Enforcer. I try and check as often as I can. The quality and clarity of the news is 100% reflective of all the efforts you put into your news program. Thank you."
Well, good Lord, I thank you so much for the huge amount of support. It helps out our channel a great deal, and I'm glad that you do enjoy it. I say this a good bit, but it can't be overstated that I find it to be an absolute honor that all of y'all watch this news and find it to be of great quality. So I thank you so much once again, and I'm also glad that you find that the quality of my work is reflective of the effort I'm putting into it. So thank you so much once again. I am trying to do college in the middle of all of this, among other things, and we're also still trying to film that video. And also, I'm thinking about maybe expanding a little bit of my videos, and I'm also going to throw up a poll right now, actually, to elaborate on that further. I'm thinking about showing videos of random clips of the news that will be shown on stream at night during the day, like about 1 or 2 of the most important bits of video that I can find at around like early in the morning and later on in the afternoon. I think it'll be a pretty quick project for me to undergo, so I'm not really in a gripe or anything about adding that, but I'm going to throw that down as a question here in the comments real quick, and we're going to poll and see if a lot of y'all would like to see little snippets of the news before the stream later on in the night. So let me write that up real quick, and while we do, I want to thank you so much again. Let me make sure I get your name right, because I think that's actually the first time you've ever sent in a super chat. Thomas Condon, and I want to thank you so much once again, man, because that kind of helps us out a huge deal and make sure that we can keep on going. So thank you so much once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $50 donation from John Rutkai, who says, "Let's not give up on encircled troops. What about resupplying the Azovstal steel plant with disposable cargo drones or gliders? One wave could be food and medicine with humanitarian markings. The other wave could be small arms and ammo."
Now, that's an interesting suggestion that I haven't heard. The best one we've ever heard was someone saying, we could send in like a modified ballistic missile with some kind of cluster warhead on it, which would then disperse the supplies out of it once it landed. So I think that's actually a new approach at that. And I think, depending on how effective the Russian anti-air defenses are over the tract of 30 to 40 miles of land they control leading up to Mariupol, that may actually be effective. So to answer that question in a way, I'm not really a logistics expert on what they could jimmy rig to try and get in there and get these supplies to them, but that does sound like one of the more reasonable offers and solutions to the problem that we've heard. So hopefully someone in the Ukrainian government is taking notes of ideas, and hopefully they can recommend this to the proper board, and then that board can look at it and say if that idea would be feasible or not. Me, honestly, I think that's the most reasonable, logical, and economical one we've heard of so far. And so I hope that they do seriously look into something like that and try and make sure that the Azov doesn't starve out in the pocket that's now been created inside of the city. So I thank you so much for the support. It does help us out a huge deal, and I hope that does answer your question. So thank you very much once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Mikara, who says, "Great work, Enforcer. Some other good organizations to donate to are Aurora Zavidka, the Drone Guys, and the Mozart Group for training Ukrainian troops."
I will look into those, but one thing that everyone has to remember about my fundraising programs is that I don't do anything that's not through the Guide Star program. I want to make sure that everyone knows, although for a small group of people, it's never good enough anyways, because they're always trying to say it's a scam or something. But I always want to make sure that it's something that I can run through YouTube, because first, they cover all the fees, and also they cover all the managing of the donations themselves. And if I had to take over doing that, I would never be able to get around to doing streams again, because it would take literally probably weeks to account for all the donations that came in on my own. But to answer that more clearly, all of my fundraisers are done through the YouTube Give program, which is something that's built into YouTube. And so I'm only allowed to go through the GuideStar registry using that and find a nonprofit that has an EIN number, and then use that fundraiser on my channel. So if it's not something like that, unfortunately, I can't do any fundraisers. Also, it's very hard to verify them, because I have people who come up and they're like, hey, would you like to support my plan to grow guppies in Ukraine after the war for food? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, like, I would be willing to do that. But then again, it's like, how do I know that you're not just going, like, this random person who's coming up to me isn't just going to abscond with the money? It's not even with a actual nonprofit or anything, if you see what I'm saying. And that's why I like the GuideStar program, because all of the nonprofits that are under that program have been verified by YouTube and have EIN numbers that I can use, and also YouTube manages all the nitty-gritty things, so that way I can just focus on promoting it instead of having to actually focus on trying to manage it. So I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question as to why those may not be possibilities, but I will look into it and see if they do have registered EINs, if they are nonprofits, and if they are, I think that may be possible. So I thank you so much for the support once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the last question of this segment. Then we're going to cover the Mariupol news and the rest of the news from the Southern Front in Russia, and then we'll return to the questions. And so with that, what is the last one of this segment?
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Rockets Red Wines, who says Phoenix Ghost is likely a rapid capability office, X-37 program, or a special access program, or Black Project, excuse me, that was quickly declassified. Breaking Defense and Defense One are good military defense sites.
Well, thank you very much for the information. I once again don't really get into a lot of the military jargon. Honestly, I don't know. I'm just not really a big fan of it. But to address that a little bit, I don't think we would be sending over something that's probably brand new tech and classified at that to Ukraine to have the chances of it being lost and then captured by the Russians, to then reverse engineer and learn about the technology that the Americans are using. I feel like there would be a lot of concerns with that, but nonetheless, maybe they have deemed that it is safe to send over, or something like something of that nature. I once again don't really know a lot about it, and I will try and look into it. But as of this moment, I'm very skeptical if that is even a thing, or if it's actually being sent over, because that's brand new news, and I'm not really sure if the U.S. government has confirmed that they are going to be sending over a drone of that name and how many. So I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address my concerns with it in a way. And so with that, we've reached the end of this question segment, and we're now going to move on into the city of Mariupol, where we're going to cover the reason why the thumbnail is the way it is tonight. The Russians have given up on Azovstal. As of the moment, the Russian sources claim that they're withdrawing a large portion of their forces from the Mariupol area, because they're saying that a heavy attack on the Azovstal wouldn't be beneficial to the citizens of Mariupol, and their whole entire explanation is, we love people and we love taking care of all of the innocent civilians that have been subjugated to terrible control and oppression by the fascists that are in charge of the Ukrainian government. And so we're going to make sure to not cause any unnecessary harm on the Ukrainian civilians due to the stubbornness of the Ukrainian military, and so we're going to leave, and we've won. But the problem is that there's still 2,000 defenders remaining inside of this Azovstal pocket, which we actually found out today extends beyond the Azovstal a little bit more towards downtown. But the fact still remains and stands that the Russians cannot claim victory when you actually haven't taken the city in its entirety. That would be like the Germans claiming that they had captured Moscow because they managed to win a couple of the suburbs on the outside of the city. It just doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't actually add up. Once again, I do think that they will be sitting there and trying to starve out the Azovstal. That does seem to be the least amount of friction in terms of planning that they can have, where they don't have to send in their precious TikTok stars and have them killed in the process, because we've seen that they're not really having a fun time anymore, and that they're actually taking a lot of casualties in the process of trying to fight this war. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the news inside of Mariupol itself, where first off, we can see a video of a very smoky Russian tank. We don't know if this is some kind of problem with the engine, if this is something that they've activated an engine smoke system, or if the tank has been hit. We are not entirely sure, but it does look very much to me like a tank engine smoke system. And so with that, that's the end of that video. Not really much to explain there. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, where we can actually see video of the Russian forces supposedly withdrawing. Well, it looks like they deleted it, so we won't be looking at that. Hate to see that. But nonetheless, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, more so around the Azovstal today. And we're going to start on the right side and head to the left, actually. So starting off, we've actually seen that the Azov apparently controls more of the plant than the Russians are wanting to let on. They are actually inside of the downtown in a way, because in this video that's come out today from some city official, we can actually see that there's still street fighting occurring near the downtown area of the city, as you can see right down there. It's got copyright music playing, of course. But anyways, you could see that the Azov apparently still has holdouts on the other side of the river, which means that they have not been pushed across this bridge here on the M14 to the Azovstal itself, which will become an incredibly important choke point for the Ukrainians on that side of the Azovstal when they actually do get pushed back to that point, if they ever do at this point. But nonetheless, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, where we can see that a Russian tank hit a mine today inside of Mariupol. We're not exactly sure where, so this marker isn't entirely accurate, but nonetheless, here is the video of that occurring. So you see that it's rolling forward right there, and then boom, it hits the mine. I have to mute it now because it's starting to play copyright music, which is not cool according to YouTube, and they will come and get me. So, as you can see there, the mine blew up. They're playing it in slow motion, but the frames are so few that it really looks like a slideshow in a way. So the video continues, of course, incredibly slowly. We're going to skip forward through the slideshow. You can see that it's being hit there. I'm not really sure if this is a slideshow or this is a problem with the video playing. Let me check my internet. My internet's good. We can see that from the tank footage, actually, that the mine exploded under the T-72. So you can see that there clearly. Golly, if this video is that unplayable, I don't think I will play it beyond that point, because you can't even tell anything from it. Yeah, we're going to skip that one. Nonetheless, T-72B3 apparently ran over a mine that was laid by the Azov in Mariupol, and it does appear that it's taken a decent amount of damage. And so that's really the summary of that video. We're now going to move on to the next one, which is now on the eastern side of the Azovstal itself, where we can see DPR troops in action inside Mariupol today. So here's the video of that. Once again, playing copyright music, so I have to mute it, unfortunately. But you can see that they're moving around. I'm not really sure what kind of explosive that is. It does look like they're using a typical RPG. Now they're loading in a normal RPG 7 shell. Unfortunately, I couldn't tell you what the other one was. We can now see them moving through the debris of some of the buildings in the area. We can now see them scooting through some more debris and running inside of a warehouse, it appears. Now they are standing there trying to look all cool for the cameras. We can apparently see what may be a dead Ukrainian right there. Very unfortunate to see. They're now moving through the rest of these warehouses. Now we can see someone having an interview in front of some kind of electrical units. So now we can see them moving through the buildings. Doesn't really look like they're in any firefights. Now we can see this fella firing an RPG out of a window. Now they are moving on from the window in a very cool, badass looking fashion. They're now moving through the building once more, incredibly slowly. Now he's kind of scooting a little bit again through the debris outside of the building. So with that, that's the end of the video. But you can see there that the DPR looks like they are in the thicket of action. I mean, like they said in Tropic Thunder, they put these guys in the shit. They were walking around doing absolutely nothing. So with that, we're now going to move on from that bit of news. There's not really much to say. It was kind of self-explanatory. To the next bit of news, where we can see an MLRS being used by the pro-Russian forces to fire directly into a building in the Azovstal. We saw this yesterday at the Azovstal Plant, somewhere else in the city, but now today we're seeing it being used on a building in the Azovstal. Unfortunately, there is no audio, but you can see the rockets flying into this large building right here, and from the video description, this is actually from an MLRS. Something else I'd like to note, this was really cool, is that when the MLRS rocket hits the pipe, here, I guess you could call it a stack, a chimney, whatever you'd like to call it, it hits it, and it creates this perfect smoke ring that comes out of the top. Now, I know that there's not really anything interesting or cool to see in a war, and this is really getting sidetracked from the actual footage and what it's showing, but look at that. That is bizarre. Tell me you've ever seen that before. I haven't. That's kind of wild. But anyways, that's the end of that video. We're now going to move on to the next one, and we know at the moment that this kind of fighting and action is going to now become less and less from Mariupol because the Russians have pretty much given up on pushing the Azovstal in general. So with that, we're now going to move on to the last bit of news we've seen, where the Azov takes out a Russian armored personnel carrier today. Once again, incredibly good news. This was apparently taken by the Russians, it seems, as per the watermark. Apparently, we may be running into some stream difficulties right now, I see, but hopefully not. We're now going to show this video. Once again, copyrighted music is being played, so unfortunately, I cannot show that. Well, actually show the audio. So we can see here, it appears that there's a BTR-82 up here. Also, real quick, I'm going to cut this really fast. I'm going to check with Matthew and make sure that we're not having any stream connectivity issues, because it appears from the chat we may be.
So it looks like it's just spinning a little bit. I think it's clearing itself up. Well, actually, this happened again. It's kind of doing it on and off right now.
I see. I'm also seeing it on my end because due to me having a second screen now, since we're going to wait hopefully for this lag to pass, I can actually see that it is buffering at the moment on my screen as well here and there, and then it goes back to playing. So everyone hang tight. We're going to hopefully wait this through and then continue the news right afterwards. So let's see if we can wait it through. So while we're waiting to see if the footage will continue without any interruptions, it's still being interrupted. I'm going to run a little poll just to make sure that we don't run out of things to do, see, or say. And I see that a lot of y'all actually want the news snippets now that we're going to try and wait this little lag spike out. So if y'all want the news snippets, we're going to try and get the news snippets. I'll see about that. So we're going to end that poll. Hopefully. Yeah, it ended. All right, so I'm going to create a new poll. Do you think the Russians will push Mariupol in the future? We're just going to put that out there and ask y'all this question real quick. And we're also having some connectivity issues, as it seems. Interesting. So it appears. Stand by, everyone.
So, folks, if you can hear me, please just refresh your screen, and that should fix some of the issues. If not, it's a problem on YouTube's end.
Yeah, this isn't anything that's being orchestrated by someone else on the outside. Apparently, it's just some kind of connectivity issue at the moment. So please bear with us. We are trying to see if it will fix itself. There's not really much we can do in the meantime. Um, but let me send out that message right here. So apparently, someone has said that the down detector is saying that YouTube is being hit hard. Thank you, Perimeter's Ghost, for sharing that. Apparently, we are suffering a little bit of stream connectivity issues because of that. And I really hate that, because it hits a lot of our viewership right now. We've gotten down to 6,000 concurrent viewers. So we've actually seen a large drop in the viewers, about a few thousand over the past few minutes. And that's usually what happens when stream connectivity issues persist. And I hate that because a lot of people are going to be missing out on the remainder of the news. So with that, I'm not going to hold us up for way too long here. So it looks like a lot of people are refreshing, and it looks like things are going good. Someone said I'm hacked. Let me go check out that real quick and see if anything's being posted on the channel. That's bizarre. I do have two-factor authentication, so that shouldn't really be a thing that's happening. So stand by, everyone. I'm just going to go take a look at that. I don't think we're being hacked. I would have to say probably not. We're pretty safe. We got a pretty secure stream. So with that, we're going to continue the video, continue the commentary, and hopefully everyone can catch up and nothing bad happens again. But anyways, we're going to continue the video. So we can see here that Russian forces appear to be running around. The BTR-82 is in the rubble, and it does appear to be stationary and not firing at the moment in the video. But you now see a Russian taking a selfie video, kind of like a blog post. This guy apparently watches Bald and Bankrupt. So with that, it appears that the Russian BTR has been hit directly on the front near the lower glacis, which may have knocked out the vehicle or killed the crew. So we can see here that there is some kind of brewing going on inside the tank. We do see some smoke emanating from it. But you now see a T-72B3 over here. It appears to be somewhere behind the BTR-82, sitting further back in the rubble. It may have been pulled up to try and give some support to the now damaged BTR. So now we can see, actually we can see that the T-72B3 is actually going to try and tow the damaged BTR out of the battlefield. Hopefully, well, not really hopefully, unfortunately, to a place where it'll probably be safe. So now we can see that they're pulling it back. We can see that they're still pulling it back, but now it looks like the BTR has caught on a lot of rebel. We're also going... let's see here. I'm just making sure that things aren't going too bad. On my end, it looks like half of the viewers have actually dropped off at this point due to connectivity issues. Hopefully they can rejoin soon. But anyways, we can now see this guy once again giving another blog update.
Enforcer, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello?
Okay, it appears to be a problem with our internet because I'm having a problem hearing you as well. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, so now...
There's a massive delay in our communications here.
Yeah. And it looks like, also, according to what I'm seeing on the control room, it looks like the stream may have just cut off and restarted there for a second.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
I would recommend closing the poll that you currently have up and put up a new poll and see what the connection issues are with people. Ask them if they're still having issues.
Got you. We'll throw up a new poll. Let's see, create a poll. What kind of question should we ask? Help.
Basically, are you having connection issues, and a yes or no?
Activity issues.
And there's still a major delay between us, so when I talk, you're hearing me probably about 10 seconds later.
Got you. So we put up a new poll. If everyone can answer that question, it will help us assess how bad it is. Unfortunately, there's really not much we could do anyways, but hopefully it's not terrible, because it looks like it is pretty rough right now at the moment. Wow, it looks like 70% of them are having connectivity issues.
So, folks, just as a sort of comfort to everybody, if we cannot get the stream working again tonight, I do have everybody's super chats and questions saved, so we will just simply pick them up tomorrow night. But that's worst case scenario.
Let's see. Man, I don't really think this is going to fix itself, so yikes. I don't really. It's going to be tough. The thing is that it's really going to be tough for me to do what I did before with internet connectivity issues a long time ago, which is run a stream tomorrow in the midday covering the rest of the news, because I have a final in the middle of the day tomorrow. So I'm not really sure if that's something in my future that I could do, but we'll see. So we're just going to sit here for a second and see if it will fix itself. Let's see. Maybe. Let me see if I can do this real quick. Hang on, everyone. If you can actually see the stream, I'm going to be back. I'm going to turn off my internet and reconnect it. Hopefully the stream lives through that, and I can just turn the internet back on, and maybe it'll fix itself. I'm not really sure. We'll see, though. All right, so let me mute these two. Okay, everyone, so if you can hear us, we're back for a second, and I've put in a poll to see if everyone would be okay with us ending the stream for tonight due to the connectivity issues that everyone's having.